for your inner child. Healing words for your inner child. I had to learn for myself that in order for me to receive healing, the healing that I so desperately wanted in my hurt areas, I had to be open to it and I had to believe. Those were the two things that I had to come to the realization of. I had to be open to healing and I had to believe. So I'm asking for you today, if there's an area that you know that you want healing in, I'm asking you to be open to it and to believe, okay? Because we have all experienced something as a child that we remember to this day, good and bad things. And sometimes what we don't realize is that what we've experienced shapes who we are. And those experiences can determine how we move and how we think and how we feel and how we act, especially when we've had traumatic experiences. There's a misconception about trauma that I want to clear up real quick before I go any further. Because I've heard a lot of people say, they're talking about other people and I overhear them saying things like, oh, she's overreacting. I went through the exact same thing that she went through and I turned out fine. That wasn't trauma that she's experienced. She's all right. She being ridiculous. I mean, I've heard all these different things over the years. But let me tell you what trauma is. So trauma is an emotional response that results from exposure to an incident or a series of events. And these events are emotionally disturbing or life-threatening. And they have lasting effects on a person's functioning, their mental, their physical, their social, their emotional, spiritual well-being. The key words to what I just said are emotionally disturbing and life-threatening. So if a person experiences something and it was emotionally disturbing for them or life-threatening for them, then for them, it was trauma. So although I might have been in a similar situation as someone else and I felt a certain way in that situation, that doesn't mean that everyone else should or does feel the same way. Because see, there's different factors that can cause different reactions, like a person's mental and emotional space before the event. The person's resiliency, their coping skills, hormones, trauma they've already experienced. All these different things can cause different people to react different ways. So I repeat, if that person was emotionally disturbed by what they experienced, then for them, it was trauma. And how I am able to handle something similar is 1000% irrelevant. And it does not take away from the fact that they were emotionally disturbed. So for me to dismiss the fact that they were emotionally disturbed by an event is unfair. And honestly, it shows a lack of empathy and a lack of empathy and a lack of love. And we have to show love to others. Love is a part of healing. So let's talk about some of the things that we've carried around from our childhood that affects us that we may or may not realize is affecting us. The first is what someone said about us. I'm going to call these things bags. So the first bag is the bag of what someone said about us when we were a child. The second one is what we did as a child. And the third bag that some of us carry around to this day is what happened to us when we were a child. So let's talk about the first one, what someone said about us when we were a child. I've already shared this publicly before. When I was 8 years old, I was at a family gathering and an older adult who was a family member came up to me. He's just staring at me with disgust on his face. And I was just really, really confused as to why he was looking at me like that. And finally he says, "Ugh, you're so skinny. You look like you're gonna die." And everything changed for me in that moment. In that moment, I was like, wait a minute, I'm skinny? Because my parents always affirmed me. And so I was confused. I was like, wait, I'm skinny. And then secondly, I was like, because of the way that he reacted, the way he looked at me when he said I was skinny, then the way I translated that was, if you're thin, you're unattractive. And so I began to see myself as unattractive because of the words that he said to me in that moment. And so going forward, I made decisions from that place, that hurt little girl that wanted someone other than her parents to tell her that she was beautiful, right? And I didn't realize that that's what was going on, but I would be out and about, and if I was with friends and everyone else got attention from guys and I didn't, I was like, see, it's because you're skinny. Or if I was at school, I had kids say different things to me. I was like, okay, yeah, it's because you're skinny, and I began to, as I became an adult, I ignored red flags in relationships because I was just wanting someone to want me. I never will forget one time I was in the car with this guy who was driving my car, taking me to work. He did not have a car. He did not have a job. He was taking me to work though. And even though that was a red flag, as I'm riding along on this ride to work, I remember looking at him and thinking, wow, he wants me. That was my thought. I ignored all of the red flags in that relationship because I just wanted someone to want me. And I had carried the words from my childhood into my adulthood. When I was a kid, I always heard that saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. The lie detector determined that that was a lie. That is absolutely not true. Words do hurt. And, some of you guys, you may not have heard what I heard when I was a child, but you might have heard things like, you're just like your dad, or you're just like your mom. And when they said it, they didn't mean it as a compliment. You might have heard someone say, you're stupid, you're ugly, you're fat, you'll never amount to anything. You think you're all that and you're not, just one thing after another. But what I came to realize one day is if it's not what God says about me, then it's impossible for it to be true. Impossible. God says I'm loved in John 3:16. He says I'm beautiful in Psalm chapter 39, verse 13 through 14. He says I'm victorious in Romans 8:37. I'm chosen in Ephesians 1:4. I'm forgiven in Ephesians 1:7. So again, if the things that were said about me as a child do not line up with what God said about me, throw it away. It's time to throw that bag away because it is not true. That second bag I mentioned was what we did as a child. So someone on here, or someone who's going to watch this replay, someone has been carrying the guilt of something you did when you were a child. Even if there are things you did as a child that were wrong, it's time for you to forgive yourself. And you may be saying right now, well, I can't forgive myself and I don't deserve forgiveness. Yes, you can. And yes, you do. As I mentioned, Ephesians 1:7, you're already forgiven. God didn't forgive us so that we can walk around in unforgiveness. Even if you deeply regret what you did, it's time for you to forgive yourself. Instead of saying it's time to let it go, I'm going to say it's time for you to let yourself go. Acknowledge that what you did was wrong, learn from what you did, and forgive yourself. When someone messes up, have you ever heard the phrase, show them some grace, and wondered what that means? When we show grace to others, it's about showing compassion, kindness, love to someone else, even though they may not notice that grace was shown to them, even though they may not appreciate it, even though they may not return the favor. And here's the big one, even if we think they don't deserve it. I'm going to stay quiet, but just a second. Even if we think they don't deserve it. This is because grace is not something that you have to earn. That doesn't mean that you become the personal doormat for people and allow them to just walk all over you. It doesn't mean that. But what it simply means is to extend the same grace for others that you would like extended for yourself. Now, for some of you, though, it's hard for you to grasp the concept of showing grace for others because you don't show grace for yourself. How can you offer something for others that you don't offer for yourself? It's imperative that you show grace for yourself, even if you think you don't deserve it. Furthermore, it's imperative for you to show grace to that child in you. That 30 years ago, 20 years ago, or however long it was for you, you have to show grace for that child that made the mistake that you believe that child made. Even if you think that child doesn't deserve it. Even if you wish you could go back in time and do things differently. Even if you were made to feel like you were worthless and you didn't deserve anything as a child, you still need to show yourself some grace, and you are not worthless. So let's talk about that third bag, which is what happened to us when we were children. Some of you to this day blame yourself for something that you experienced as a child, something that happened to you, feeling that if you would have just done something differently, you could have changed the outcome of what happened to you or what you experienced. One of the things that I carried with myself that I experienced when I was a child was being sexually abused. I blamed myself for that because my body responded. And I felt that it was my fault because my body responded, not understanding that that was normal. Because I was a kid, how would I know to understand that? But nevertheless, I still blamed myself for that. And I carried that and I made decisions from that place. And I found myself at times, questioning myself and feeling depressed and all these different things because of what I experienced as a child and blaming myself for it. And you may not have experienced the same exact thing as me, but you may have been telling yourself things like, man, if I would have just stayed home that day, if I would have just listened to that feeling I had, something told me not to go over there. Something told me not to call that person, but I did it anyway. And you blame yourself. If I would have just told someone, if I would have stood up for myself, and the list goes on and on and on. Let me remind you that you are a child And what you experienced wasn't your fault, and it was beyond your control. Some of you right now, I'm saying this and you're having thoughts, you're battling with yourself mentally, like, okay, I know she's saying it's beyond my control, but it wasn't. It was beyond your control. It was. You are not what happened to you. You're still valuable. Whew, I don't know why I feel emotional. You're still valuable. You're still worthy. You are still loved. And if you feel like no one in this world loves you, that's not true. John 3:16 right there tells you you're loved. And quite honestly, I love you. I don't have to meet you to know that I love you. The Bible says to love your neighbor as yourself. I love you. You are loved. You are worthy. What happened to you is not the end for you. There's more for you, more than you could ever think or imagine. The best is yet to come. The best is yet to come. And it's not right for you to think that as a child, you should have thought like an adult. I think about my kids, I have to remind them to do different things. I won't embarrass them and give examples right now, but I think about my kids. I have kids ranging from the age of 10 to 20. Well, she'll be 20 in June, but even as an 18, 17, 16, you're still a child. And it's not right for you to think that you should have thought like an adult when it concerning whatever it is that happened to you. So if I don't expect my kids, to think like adults, I feel the same way about you. And you may have never said to yourself, man, I wish I thought like an adult back then. I wish I thought like an adult. You may have never thought that, but the decision that you wish you would have made is not a realistic choice that a child would have necessarily made or a teenager would have necessarily made. Okay. And you've carried that moment with you, and unknowingly, you've made decisions that weren't the best for your life because the hurt child in you has been driving the car. And that's how trauma works. Trauma seeks to push you out the driver's seat of the car. It wants to jump into that driver's seat, and it wants to control your thoughts, your emotions, and your actions. That's what trauma does. The next health talks that we'll be having in June, we're going to be talking about overcoming fear, abuse, and trauma with Tiffany Graham. She's a provisional licensed professional counselor and a transformation coach. And we're going to dive deeper into that topic of trauma, of overcoming trauma, again, and fear and abuse. So you want to make sure you register for that. But just because you've experienced some of the things that I mentioned, those different bags that we've carried, the things that someone said about you, the things that you did, and the things that happened to you, that doesn't mean that you're unable to grow and thrive and become the best version of yourself. You absolutely can. The inner child in you can and will be healed. But step one, you have to believe it's possible. Do you believe it's possible? Some of us, we say we believe it's possible, but then our actions show that we actually don't really believe it. You have to believe it. I encourage you to stop in your tracks and remind yourself to give yourself some grace. That's the second way for your inner child to be healed. The first is believe in yourself. The second one is give yourself some grace. The third thing is do not allow what others have said and done and what you've experienced to dictate your thoughts, your emotions, and your actions. And I know someone is thinking, well, it's not that easy, Ernestine. It's not that easy for me not to allow what I've experienced and what people have said and what I've done to control me. It's not that easy. But, I think of it this way. It may not be easy at first, but it will get easier with time as you begin to fight. Just like a person who goes to the gym and they're trying to grow muscles, at first, I'm sure their arm looks similar to mine, at first. But as they continue to go to the gym and they have their workout routine, it gets easier with time and they begin to see the results that they're wanting to see. It's the same thing with not allowing what we've experienced to dictate our thoughts and emotions and actions. With time, it gets easier. And the way you do that is by taking back control. I said trauma wants to take control. You take back control. And you're like, okay, well, how do I take back control? Because I want to do it. How do I take back control? Number one, you can go to counseling. I'm so happy that we live in a world now where mental health is talked about more, because it used to be that it wasn't talked about much. And people didn't want to go, especially in the African-American community. Counseling was not something that people did a lot of, right? But I encourage you to go to counseling. Now there's different reasons why people don't go. Some it's for financial reasons, like that used to be my reason. Like I don't have the money to go. But another reason that some people don't go is because, they don't feel comfortable talking to a stranger about their personal information, But listen, if you have been making damaging and life-threatening decisions that you feel you can't control, you're going to have to push past that and you should go. You really should. And if you go to counseling and you find that, okay, this is not the right counselor for me, that doesn't mean you throw away counseling. You can go try a different counselor. I had to do that. I went to counseling before and it didn't work out for us. And I was like, okay, I am very committed to becoming the best version of myself. So I'm going to find a different counselor. It's like a puzzle. It's just like a puzzle piece, If you have this puzzle piece and you have this puzzle piece and you're trying to put it in and it doesn't fit, you don't throw away the puzzle, do you? No, you don't throw away the entire puzzle. You keep looking for the right piece and you find the right piece that fits in. Same with counseling. Find the right counselor. Don't throw away counseling altogether. Find the right counselor that works for you. And then you begin your journey. Another way to take back control is go to war with your thoughts. When I was in San Antonio, I had started a nonprofit called Girls Who Conquer before I moved out of the state. And we would go into a local school there and we would do small group sessions with the girls. And then we offered a conference to the city called Girls Who Conquer. And I asked the girls one day because they were struggling with their thoughts. And I said, okay, so if a person walked up to you in the hallway and they slapped you, what would you do? And all of them were like, oh, miss, I would do this. I would do that. No one's going to disrespect me like that. I slap them, I this, I that. And I said, well, let me ask you a question then. If somebody would walk up to you and you would slap them, then why are you allowing your mind to disrespect you in the same way and slap you around? And they were like, they got to thinking about what I was saying, but, it's important for you to, work on your thoughts, work on your thought life, fight those thoughts back. Because, your thoughts can get out of control if you let them. You'll be up all night rehearsing something that hasn't even happened, going back and forth in your mind about something that hasn't even happened. It's because you're not fighting your thoughts. You have to take every thought captive. In 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 3-5, it talks about taking every thought captive to obey Christ. You have to take every thought captive. And then another way to take back control is to self-regulate, learn how to self-regulate. As I mentioned before, I'm a trauma debriefing specialist. So with my clients, I teach them how to process the event, reflect on its impact, and I teach them how to self-regulate so that if they're triggered by something, they're able to stay in the driver's seat of the car. Because something in the world is going to remind you about what happened to you, but it's about what you do whenever you're reminded that matters. And self-regulating really, really helps with that. Thank you for watching Health Talks with Ernestine, a discussion on healing words for your inner child. If you haven't already, make sure that you like and share this video and also subscribe to our YouTube channel.